Today on the Inside Scoop, Miami making noise with a pool party down in Coral Gables. Hopefully the neighbors didn't call the cops. Florida State does something so rare we're not even sure it's happened before. But first, we're talking UGA recruiting. Let's bring on Dogs HQ publisher Rusty Mansell. The biggest domino just dropped. Five-star Dylan Raiola has officially committed to the Dogs. Rusty, the news just broke moments ago. How big of a get is this for Georgia?
Obviously, it's huge. When you get that centerpiece, when you get that player that every prospect in the country is watching on where he's going to make his decision, now those kids know if I'm going to play with Dylan Raiola, I want to be a Georgia Bulldog. Massive, massive get leading into this big weekend, the scavenger hunt weekend in Athens.
Whew. Dog fans, do me a favor. Like this video and subscribe to the On3 YouTube page. We have all the latest recruiting developments and a ton of Georgia football news. All right, Rusty, why do you think the timing of this happened today?
You know, it almost went down, Josh, a couple of weeks ago, but I think the scope of this weekend is going to start this big weekend for Georgia. It's a big week coming up. I think Dylan is at the end of it. I think he's tired of probably taking phone calls and listen. Nebraska, obviously the ties there. USC's been on the phone with him. It's been an ongoing process, and kudos to him. He decommitted Ohio State. He took his time. This thing, like I said, it almost happened a couple of weeks ago, but he comes out today, and this gives Georgia a ton of momentum heading into this weekend because Georgia can call all these prospects and say, you know what, we got him.
And I'm going to ask you about the other targets that Raiola impacts. But first, I got to ask you about quarterback Ryan Puglisi, the four-star QB out of Connecticut, committed to UGA in October. Now, he stated that he's ready for the competition. But, Rusty, now that Raiola is a reality and he's on board the Georgia commit list, how do you think this will impact Ryan Puglisi?
I guarantee you his phone's going to light up tonight. And Ohio State's one of those schools that we were also told they're trying to talk to him. Some other schools, everybody's going to reach out tonight and gauge that on him. Is he really 100% in on Georgia? But I'll tell you this, he has said the right things. He knew Georgia's been recruiting Dylan Raiola. He knew Georgia was recruiting Dylan Raiola last year when he committed. So he had to know at some point there was a good chance this was going to come. Right now, it looks like, he's still going to be a Georgia Bulldog, but I guarantee there'll be a lot of schools calling him. So we'll see how it goes over the next couple of weeks to months.
Yeah, it's definitely something worth keeping an eye on. Next weekend is Georgia's big scavenger hunt event. If you're a Georgia fan, I don't need to explain to you what this is. If you know, you know. Do we expect Raiola on campus this coming weekend as a newly committed Georgia Bulldog?
If I had to bet money, I would say yes, he'll be there. I don't know 100% as of today, but I'm leaning that way, that he'll be here with his family, especially now that he is publicly committed. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is like Georgia's biggest weekend. That's not, a big official visit weekend. With J.J. Smith, Jeremiah Smith on campus. If I'm Dylan Raiola, I'm coming across country, and I'm gonna spend some time in Athens this weekend.
Yeah, and five-star wide receiver Cam Coleman was on campus last weekend. Jeremiah Smith on campus next weekend. Ryan Wingo also interested. How does this Raiola commitment affect some of these wide receiver targets Georgia's on?
Well, obviously, it gets their attention. You know what I mean? Like it's time to put up or shut up. You've been saying, hey, y'all get that guy, that I may come there. Well, guess what? We've got that guy, and we got another guy. So we got two quarterbacks. If you want to come here and be that guy. So Georgia's in on some big-time targets. Brian McClendon has been on Jeremiah Smith for a while. And the first battle is to get him on campus, and he's going to get him on campus this weekend with his family for an official visit.
Whew. All right. Well, recruiting never stops. And Georgia fans, now that they got Raiola on board, Rusty, they need you to tell them who is Georgia's biggest priority now in the 2024 class that's uncommitted.
For me, his position of need is so big, and it's that 5-tech defensive end. I love Edric Houston out of Buford High School. This is a young man. Trey Scott was at his game on Friday night, his spring game against Norcross in Georgia. No secret now. They lost some battles last year. Kelby Collins, Vic Burley, some of those guys, those 6'5", 275-pound defensive end guys, almost Trayvon Walker type players. They desperately need some of those bodies. But for me, it would start with Edric Houston. Another young man I saw last week, Justin Green out of Mountain View, a 4-star defensive end. So Georgia needs some defensive end, needs some guys that can play this position, that can play with their hand in the dirt or stand up. So Edric Houston, man, is a big time target.
There you have it. Told you, recruiting never stops. There's more targets on the board. And guess what never stops? The Dogs HQ message board. I'm sure it's going crazy. Rusty, go tend to that board. See you later.
Get back, man. Thanks, Josh.
More than a dozen of Miami's priority recruiting targets gathered at Hurricanes head coach Mario Cristobal's house for a pool party yesterday. No word on if there was any noise violations, but let's bring on Stephen Wagner of CaneSport to talk about Miami's massive recruiting weekend. There were some elite prospects on campus. Look at this: 5-star edge Dylan Stewart, 5-star defensive lineman David Stone, then a couple committed elsewhere. Mylan Graham, Ohio State wide receiver commit, Georgia cornerback commit Ellis Robinson, and 4-star Georgia safety commitment Jalen Hayward. So let's start at the top of this list, Stephen. Now that he's been to campus, should Miami be mentioned among the favorites for number 1 overall player, edge Dylan Stewart?
You know, it's kind of hard to leave Miami out of that group of top schools for a guy like Dylan, who's now made 2 visits to Miami this spring. We know that Jason Taylor has played a really big role in kind of generating that momentum to get Stewart to campus. Like we said, he's now been to campus twice. I think Miami is making a real impression here, and I think it's going to be hard for Miami to be left out of that group of top schools. It would not surprise me if he ends up making another return visit to campus. He wasn't available to talk to us after his visit, but I can tell you that there is some real momentum here with the number 1 overall prospect in the class. I would definitely expect him to be back at some point. I can't tell you when exactly, but it would not shock me at all if we see Dylan back on campus at some point this summer.
Yeah, I think that's the next step for Miami, is getting him back on campus, whether that be for an official or unofficial. But looking at Dylan Stewart's recruitment, I don't think we're going to get a decision for him for some time now, at least December, maybe even into the late signing period. But we'll see on the number 1 overall player in America. All right, now David Stone was back. Last week, I was asking Sam Spiegelman, what's going on with Miami and David Stone? You know, there was those back-to-back visits in late March, early April, and then things kind of went quiet while David Stone was taking visits elsewhere. So does Miami have a real chance to pull him out of the Midwest now that he made a 3rd visit to Miami this offseason?
You know, it really felt like this visit, more than anything, was a visit to kind of reshift momentum back to Miami, to try to steal back a little bit of that momentum that I think they kind of lost during the month of April, whenever we saw things kind of pick back up with Oklahoma and Michigan State for David Stone. It was really important for Miami to be able to get him back to campus this past weekend to try to recapture some of that momentum that I think they lost. Because there was a time, I think, where it really felt like Miami was very, very firmly in the picture. He was speaking glowingly about Miami after his second weekend visit back in March, whenever he came down with his family. His whole family loved it. His little brother loved it. He kept on throwing up the U. Mom and dad were really ecstatic about the way that things went. They loved the interactions that they had with Miami's full coaching staff, with Jason Taylor, with Joe Salveo, with Mario Cristobal, with all of those guys. So I think Miami was able to regenerate a little bit of momentum here. But of course, Oklahoma and Michigan State, they've been at the top of that list for so long that Miami's going to have some pretty stiff competition. And obviously, David being from Oklahoma, the Sooners have had a lot of staying power. But would not surprise me at all if we find Miami very firmly in that mix down the home stretch, because I do think that they're still in the mix right now.
Yeah, it was crucial that they get him back. You could kind of, like you said, feel that momentum starting to wane, but getting him on campus, Miami definitely back in the mix for David Stone moving forward into the most important months, the summer recruiting months. All right. The next 3 guys on the list, though: Mylan Graham committed to Ohio State, Ellis Robinson to Georgia, and Jalen Hayward to Georgia. Who do you think, after this weekend, all 3 of these guys were on campus, who do you think Miami has the best shot to flip?
Man, it's got to be Jalen Hayward. It really has to be Jalen Hayward. Miami was a school that maybe wasn't at the top of his list back whenever he committed to Georgia in January, but they have been extremely consistent just throughout his entire recruiting process. They're maintaining that daily contact. Lance Guidry, Jamil Ade, even Alex Mirabal went up to Rockledge. This effort is resonating with Jalen. He does like the effort that Miami is making for him. Now, of course, Georgia, they've been the team to beat all throughout his recruitment. And he's been pretty clear about why he's committed to Georgia. Back-to-back national championships, the amount of guys that they're putting in the NFL. I mean, that resume is pretty hard to beat. But Miami is telling Jalen, hey, all that stuff that you can do at Georgia, you can do it here in Coral Gables too, and just stay home. Be part of that class that really helps rebuild the U and restore it to its former glory. He's now visited Miami twice this spring. He will have visited Miami 3 times in this calendar year whenever he gets to Coral Gables for his official visit in late June. And right now, Miami's one of 2 programs that's going to get an OV from him, along with Georgia. So Miami's very well in that mix for him, along with Florida. And then UCF, kind of a team that's kind of trying to get back into the picture. But Jalen Hayward, I think there really is going to be a chance that Miami could flip him, although obviously committed to Georgia. Georgia's not losing a ton of flips. So Miami's got their work cut out for him.
Yeah, number 3 ranked safety in America. He keeps taking these visits to Coral Gables. We'll see what happens. I think this is probably the long game that Miami has to play for Jalen Hayward. I don't expect a flip anytime soon, but Miami is in good position, like you said. Speaking of being in good position for a safety, how about 4-star Zaquan Patterson out of Miami Gardens? He's trending heavily in Miami's direction. Do you think he could be the Canes' next big commitment?
I think that Miami is in really good shape with Zaquan Patterson. Over at CaneSport, we put in an RPM for him to land at Miami back in March. I still think that that's probably pretty accurate. Effort really is going to be the name of the game, I think, for Zaquan. And Miami is maintaining that really good, consistent level of communication. They are showing him how bad they want him in Coral Gables. He's now taken a couple of visits down to Miami, and he's still planning on taking that official visit to Miami this summer, although he does not have any official dates currently locked in. He did say that he's still planning on going ahead and taking that official visit. Had been saying for quite some time that he was thinking about committing, maybe sometime in December, maybe even at the state championship game. If he were to commit, I think that his recruitment would probably remain open. I think it's kind of tough for me to see him, really hardcore committing to a school and just completely shutting things down. Michigan's a program that's up there. Same for Florida State, same for Auburn. And I believe Ohio State was also in his top 5. So he's obviously an extremely sought-after prospect. But Miami is really showing how badly they want him to stay home in Coral Gables, and he's willing to give them that consideration, certainly.
All right. Miami's spring recruiting has gotten off to a bit of a slow start. Respectfully, Miami fans, I'm being respectful when I say that. This weekend, though, with all those 5-stars showing up on campus, I was following along on CaneSport. You guys knew it was going to be a recruiting weekend. I won't even say a big recruiting weekend. But then, 5-star after 5-star keeps showing up, and it just got me thinking, is something big brewing under the radar at Miami right now?
It might be time for Mario Cristobal
like
to put on those loafers. That's kind of been the signature for whenever Mario Cristobal is really up to something, is whenever he busts out those loafers. I think it might be. I think we might be nearing time for him to bust out those loafers. I mean, we knew it was going to be. We knew it was going to be a recruiting weekend. We knew they were going to have some prospects on campus. We knew Dylan Stewart was going to be visiting. We knew Caleb Odom, the number 3 ranked tight end in the class. We knew he was going to be visiting too. Some of these guys, Mylan Graham, whenever he showed up, the 5-star receiver committed to Ohio State, I was like, I was not expecting him at all. Then we see David Stone and Ellis Robinson posting all this stuff on their social medias about being in the Miami area. All of a sudden, you really start realizing how big of a recruiting weekend this was. I even talked to one recruit there who said, yeah, they kind of pitched this to us as like an elite junior day. And that's certainly what it was whenever you see the absolute boatload of talent that Miami was getting on campus. And I think really more than anything, because you're not going to flip a guy like Mylan Graham from Ohio State after just one unofficial visit to Coral Gables, no matter how awesome or great or fantastic it is. That's not going to happen after just one visit. But I think what this weekend was Miami trying to get their foot in the door with a lot of these really top tier recruits. Getting their foot in the doors with the Mylan Grahams of the world. It would not surprise me if we start seeing some commitments roll in probably in June, around the time of official visit season. I would expect June to be a really big month for the Hurricanes. I think that Mario Cristobal is really going to capitalize on all of these official visits that they're going to be having throughout that month, especially whenever you see the kind of talent that's going to be having these official visits. Caleb Odom is a guy who really comes to mind that Miami's made some real progress with, it feels like, over the last couple of months. I think he's visited campus a few times now. And, it feels like Miami's certainly in a good position with him. And they're going to have a lot of other, really elite talent on campus during that month as well.
Yeah, and I think if Miami does crank this thing up and make another run at a top 5 class like last year, we're going to look back at this weekend as kind of the turning point on where things started trending in the right direction with not just good prospects, but the elite of the elite. So thanks, Steven, for dropping by the Inside Scoop. Go, guys, if you want more information on Miami's big weekend, go to CaneSport. Steven and the boys got you covered. Thanks. Talk to you soon. Just when you think you've seen it all in recruiting, Florida State goes out and does something so rare that it has all the experts stunned. But first, we have news on 2 4-star prospects trending towards Florida State. The Seminoles are putting together a strong recruiting class this cycle with 11 commitments in 2024 as FSU sits at number 7 in the On3 industry team rankings. We have some recruiting prediction machine news. FSU has jumped in the lead on the RPM for a key player on both offense and defense. Let's start on the offensive side of the ball. We've talked a lot about 4-star Kylan Fox, tight end out of Grayson High School. Chad Simmons put in a pick for him to FSU on Friday. It's 6'4.5", 217 pounds. Fox is a playmaker in the passing game, and it would be a big pickup for FSU, who already has 1 5-star tight end on board in Landon Thomas. Fox has a commitment date set for July 4th and a new official visit schedule. Here it is. He'll be seeing UCF on June 2nd. He'll now visit Miami on June 9th. He'll go out to Boulder, Colorado, and visit with Coach Prime on June 16th. And then he'll be at Florida State June 23 through 25. And look at that date, because I think it's significant. The Noles get the final visit of his official visit tour in June, right before his July 4th commitment. Now, could the Seminoles be close to adding its first 4-star on the defensive side of the ball? The commitment timeline is expected to be over the summer, but I like where Florida State sits for edge Dylan Stevenson. Based on intel, Chad Simmons put in a prediction for the 4-star to head to FSU, but it won't be easy. Dylan Stevenson attends Columbus High School. That's Mario Cristobal's high school alma mater. You know the Canes are going to be heavily involved in this one. But he's been to FSU 4 times this offseason, and I expect another visit coming up this summer. It's something to keep an eye on as FSU looks to build that defensive class next. Okay, on to the big news of the weekend. Let's bring on national recruiting analyst Sam Spiegelman. More than 2 years after he signed with Florida State football team, 4-star wide receiver Destyn Hill is officially a Seminole. The Noles' highest ranked commitment from the 21 class is now on campus. Here's what Mike Norvell had to say. Destyn was one of the best receivers in the country at Edna Karr High School while earning high honors academically. He is a dynamic playmaker with game-changing speed, which will give him the opportunity to have an impact at receiver and also in the return game. Sam, you were so far ahead of this story. I think it was hard for a lot of FSU fans to even get excited about it, to even wrap their heads around the fact that Destyn Hill could finally make it to campus. But you mentioned it back on a December show, and were emphatic about it back in early March. So are you now surprised, or is this just a full circle moment for you now that Destyn Hill is on campus?
It was just a part of the process. Like we said, everything was heading in that direction in December when I reported it. He has been around Ed Nakar ever since, working out with the football team, getting ready for this moment, kept everything in line to enroll earlier last week. He's now on campus. He is now with the football program. 2 years ago, Josh, coaches at FSU thought he was going to be an impact true freshman for Mike Norvell and what they were building over there in Tallahassee. He has elite speed and game-breaking ability in multiple facets. But now he's finally there. The team is way better off than they were 2 years ago, and now they're able to plug him in. I still think he's going to have an instant impact at FSU.
Yeah, what are your sources, the same ones that were right all along about Hill's enrollment to Florida State? What are they saying about what sort of shape he's in?
Yeah, well, like I said, he's been working out with the football team, with coaches he's very familiar with for the past almost 6 months. He showed up to Tallahassee at 6 foot, 200 pounds. That's 10 to 12 pounds heavier than when he graduated at Nakar a couple of years ago. The biggest thing I got was the speed is still there. I know that he's still been around the Ed Nakar track program. That's one of the foundational parts of their football program and why they have so many Division I players come out of that program every single year. Destyn being the fastest to ever come through the program. That speed, I'm told, is still there, but probably the biggest takeaway, he's about 200 pounds. He's heavier. He's more muscular. He's been able to stay in shape despite not playing football at FSU. I think all signs are pointing in the positive direction for Destyn. He's stayed together physically, maybe even in better shape than he was graduating high school.
Do you think he'll be a star at Florida State, even though his enrollment was delayed?
Absolutely. 2 years is not that big of a deal. You talk about players now transferring after a year or two of not playing, but, he's still continued to work out, and I'm sure he has some work to do to play catch up with the other receivers there. But if the speed is still there, he's still a 6 foot, 200 pound receiver. I've compared parts of his game to Jamar Chase in the past, where he's so dynamic after the catch. He is so strong. He is so tough, making combat catches in the middle of the field. Then we talk about the game-breaking speed. He can be used in a multitude of ways, whether that's stretching the field vertically, making gadget plays on sweeps and end arounds. There's a lot of ways for him to impact the game, and I still think when he gets to FSU, the ceiling will be even higher once he gets acclimated and used to the college development that goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and he's there for summer workouts. He's on campus right now doing strength and conditioning with the program, so we'll see what Destyn Hill looks like coming into fall camp. But Sam, you did a great job covering this story from top to bottom for us. Thanks for dropping by the Inside Scoop now that Destyn Hill is officially on campus. Thank you for watching. Make sure you smash that subscribe button for me. And remember to check out all the videos on the On3 YouTube page.